Everybody ready? Cool. So Mike's got about 30 minutes. Mike Green with Restore a House. If you don't know Mike, he's going to introduce himself in a second. We're lucky enough to have known Mike for the last few years now, and Mike's been a great resource for us. He's going to be a great resource for everybody in this room. He's got a lot of experience. He's done a lot of deals all over the Baltimore area, all over the DC area, and he really knows his stuff. Got a really good topic ahead, so here we go. Do your thing.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Got 30 minutes.
I appreciate that. Drink a few more beers, though, because my speech will sound funnier, and you guys might enjoy it. So, listen, let's all stand up real quick. Let's stand up and stretch out. I just want to, oh, yeah, hold on. Let's get serious about it. Let's pretend someone's got a $50,000 deal. Stand up like that's happening. Like right now. All right. Now you can sit back down. I just wanted to make sure you guys would do it and you were listening. That's all. I'm just trying to control your mind. So I'm really going to start with a subject that it really is kind of parlaying off what Josh talked about, and he's essentially was teaching you how to get the phone ringing, right? And this is how you do the marketing so your phone rings. And if you're new to investing, the first thing you want to try to accomplish is get your phone ringing, because what will happen, and I see a lot with people I mentor or I help or I just see kind of come into these things over years, is they educate themselves over, and they're always looking for the same answers. They get them, but they never take action. So the fastest way, and I'll give you a little story based on me, because I'm like a killer at sales at this point, but it's 10 years into it, and I'll just tell you that I didn't start there. When I first started marketing, and I went to school somewhere, I don't want to mention any names, but anyhow, I went to school, she knows where, because we were just talking about it, but he taught me how to market, and amazing, like send these mailers out when many people weren't doing them back then, 10 years ago. Not a lot of people were marketing, and not a lot of people were teaching it. They were very secretive. Everyone teaches now. Everyone was very secretive 10 years ago, because they didn't want to give away their good way of making money. But when I started getting my phone ringing, the most interesting part of this is that it would ring, and I would just look at the voicemails and not want to call them back. And I didn't, by the way. For like weeks, I didn't call them back. Then they started to pile up. And then I had to punch myself in the face and man up, man, just call them back. They'll be all right. And I just was afraid to talk to them. And I imagined that that was me back then. Dave probably laughs because it's not that way now. We cold call probate people. I mean, we are on the phone having dynamic conversations. People are cussing us out. We take it all in stride and have fun, kind of turn it and reframe it into something more positive. Usually we are there to really help them find, some way to get the most money for their property. And I usually am the avenue to do that when it's something that needs to be renovated. Because I do so many houses, I often pay a little more, because I can. I don't need to get rich on every property. I also very specifically know the numbers, which is a really good skill to start working on and learn over time. But I tell you that story because, look, that's where I started. Eventually, I started scheduling 2 hours a day where I just would make myself make these phone calls back. And then my next thing I was afraid to do was go out and talk to people in person. So you got to get over that fear. So when I tell you just jump in, I'm just being just jump in. Get that phone ringing, talk to people, and just start seeing houses. If you can get out as a newbie or even as someone that's intermediate, I probably don't have to tell you, people who are actually doing this have figured that out already. But that's usually the one thing, if I had to say there was one thing that makes people either make it in the business or not, it's usually their ability to generate leads and then take phone calls and then work the client and work with them to find out good solutions that make sense. If you can do that, you usually will make it in this business because the guy who has the deal is the guy who has the power. You don't have to renovate it, you can wholesale it. You can wholesale it to me or half the other people in this room. They would be totally willing to buy any deal that makes sense. So one thing I found, and then the next thing you get concerned about, well, I don't have a buyer's list. Who I sell it to? If you have a really good deal, I can promise you, you won't have to go far to sell it. You literally will not have to go far. There's at least 10 people in this room that will buy it in 1 second, and we probably would all wrestle each other for it. So you could make that happen. You just invite us all to the house and be like, whoever wins the wrestling match gets the deal for this price. And I'm probably going to lose at that point, just to be honest, because I'm not a good wrestler. But one of the bigger guys will win, they'll get the deal. That's how badly people want deals right now. So who you're going to sell it to is fairly irrelevant. Don't sweat that too much. Sweat knowing the numbers and knowing that the deal makes sense and getting to know the people you'll sell it to simply because they can give you the feedback to tell you this is how much I pay in this neighborhood. These are the ratios I look for in this neighborhood. And once you know those things, then you kind of know where you can buy at. You start to know that, okay, these houses generally take $50,000 to $70,000 in renovation. They sell for this as an ARV, an after repair value, and then you can buy them for X dollars. And you can find a lot of that information out on Maris. Just look at all the lowest sales, look at kind of the as-is sales, the things that need renovation, see what kind of the market is. When you're comping for after rehab value, you can also comp for as-is value. And you can start to get a feel for what are people paying in Parkville, what are they paying in Hamilton, Glen Burnie, the areas where a lot of rehabs are going on. Once you know that, then you gain that confidence to talk to people, because that really is the first step. I mean, you could study for years, but if you don't take that first step of getting your phone to ring and sending out, you know, the mailers and doing the list, everything he said, by the way, was spot on. He's telling you stuff right out of his playbook. I didn't disagree with a thing he said, by the way, and I've done probably well over $1 million in marketing over 10 years. And I literally do all the exact same things to start with. And everything he said was spot on, because you're getting really good information from Josh on how to like generate and spend your money wisely. What I want to talk to you about is what you do once you get the phone ringing. Like, that's the key. What do you do once the phone's ringing? So the first step is you need to generate a call tracking system and a way to intake your leads. I use personally, I'll share what I do just as an example. There's many other ways to do the same thing. But the first thing I do is I create like a Google Voice, and I do it for every mailing campaign. So I want to have a different number. So let's say that it's like 2,000 for my probate. I want to have 2,001 for my absentee owners, 2,002. So I know like everything that came in, like what I spent $1,000 and I got 10 phone calls on 2,000, which was my probate mailer. So I want to be able to know the numbers, right? Because in any business, if you don't know the numbers, then you can't make educated business decisions. So it starts with knowing the numbers. Because marketing, it's a lot of psychology in marketing, by the way, because sometimes it doesn't happen for a month, then you get a bunch in 1 month. And when you go through that, you generally don't have a very good understanding of what's really happening. But the numbers never lie to you when you're tracking properly. So there's many times I thought a campaign wasn't working, and it happened to be one of the best campaigns financially, because it didn't generate, I think Josh said this, it didn't generate a lot of leads, but it generated a lot of income, which is the absolute thing we care about, by the way. It generates 10 leads and we make a ton of money off of it, then who cares? I'd rather run less leads, make more money. Because I had some campaigns I've done where they generated like 100 leads a week, and we were just crushed with running those 100 leads a week, and we got nothing over like 4 months. We obviously cut that out, but it made us feel like we were busy at the time, but we made no money with it. So you want to stick with the stuff that actually makes sense. So for me, first step is create a Google Voice, then create a different one for every mailing campaign. Once you've done that, then you're going to take in the lead and you're going to call people back. I generally like to do voicemail, but if you do have the time and the ability to answer the phone, you will get a better result. So if they call and you're like, hey, this is John from, XYZ house, that's going to work better than them giving you a voicemail, because some people won't leave voicemails, and sometimes they don't answer when you call back. That actually happens quite often, believe it or not. You call, and you can't find them. Then, I usually will go stand out front of their house at that point. It's like, why won't you answer the phone? Then I find them on Facebook and like try to friend them. And, it gets creepy at some point. So I don't want to see you go down that route. Don't do that if you don't have to. That's the reality of it. If you can get them on the phone and you have that chance, then that is the optimal thing to do. But if you can't, then I will tell you, my company, I didn't answer the phone because it just didn't make sense for me. I had too many phone calls coming in. At some point, not long ago, we did have someone on the front desk taking the phone calls in the daytime. And it gives a little extra boost of your return on investment. So that's a really good thing. So the key, the next step is that you have to have some systems in place. I've created really amazing systems to really filter through. Roughly, we were averaging about 70 to 80 leads a week when we were spending about 15 grand a month, roughly. So that's can tell you some return on investment, some expectations of what you would generate from 15 grand a month. And from those, we bought 151 deals, I think, in 15, and we rehabbed 70 of them, and we wholesaled all the rest, or auctioned, one of the two. And they generated over, I think, roughly net income, $1.5 million net income for that stuff, after paying $100,000 a month in expenses, marketing and everyone else. I've sold that business about 5 months ago, and I actually created a new business that is so much easier. My ex-partner did the same with the old business and made it much smaller, because I think Jason was talking about, it's this scaling down thing right now, right? It's all about like, I made a lot of income, but I can almost make the same amount of income with doing a lot less work and a lot less risk. And it's more controllable, because at some level, the more you do, you start to get a law of diminishing return starts to kick in, and it becomes hard. Like the competition for those extra deals gets really hard. The one thing I will tell you, and you can take this to the bank, is that if you're only doing 20 deals a year, you could find 15, 20 deals a year with ease once you get good at this. And there's going to be enough always for that. You'll never be in this market and say there's no deals. You literally, if you find there's no deals, then find out what you're doing wrong. Because I promise you, in every market, there's plenty of deals and there's plenty of people finding them. You just, maybe your skill set hasn't evolved to the place where it can get these deals done. I consistently would listen to people tell me how they can't find deals when I was buying 151 deals a year. And they'd be like, oh, you can't find deals anymore. I'm like, yeah, you're right, man. You're right. I'd get out the business if I was you. I mean, if you don't want to do it. I mean, now I give real advice, so that was my bad advice when it was competition. It was fair game. But I mean, I wasn't going to tell them, hey, no, man, come on, do these things and teach them. Because look, I mean, it was them being negative. And I tell you this because I want to give you an example of like how not to be negative. It's really positively frame that if someone else is doing it, I can do it, right? Someone else is doing it, I can do it. It's that simple. And there's plenty of deals out there. It feels very hard when you're new because it's not easy when you're new because you have a learning curve. And you can expect in the first 6 months a year as you're marketing, for you just to take that time is education time. Time you'll get used to talking to people on the phone, understanding the nuances of things you want to say and not say and how you can help them. That really doesn't happen overnight. You know, you won't do that in the first 5 people you talk to. You'll do it over the first 6 months to a year of talking to people consistently every month. You will start to develop the mindset, the speech tone, you know, the lingo for the business. You'll know how to help them in the best way and how to construct a deal. So it's not an overnight thing. It's something that generally takes 6 months to a year if you're smart, and for most people it doesn't happen, and I'm honest about that. So for every, was that a guy over here? No, it's okay, sorry.
Have you tried Bumper yet?
Bumper?
Bumper.com.
What does it do? The answer is no.
Like it's one account, but you get actually multiple different phone numbers.
Sounds amazing.
So you can actually.
How much does it cost?
$9.99.
All right, well, I saved $10. I'm just saying.
But you gotta have 3.
I'll treat you to a drink with my $10 I saved. But no, listen, like, so if you're doing a ton of marketing, stuff like that starts to make sense. I think I was using Callfire, and Bumper sounds cheaper than what I was paying for Callfire. But if you're a beginner, go free, keep the cost down. First rule of all business, lead with revenue. Make revenue first and then spend revenue. Don't spend it before you make it. There's so many things you think you need to be successful in this business and to run it right, and there's only one thing you need: marketing, a phone, and the ability to go do it. You need nothing else. I mean, I don't even have business cards. I know a few people ask me, because you don't need them. Now, if you're newer, I would suggest getting them. I personally don't need them, but I'm not giving that advice to anyone else, but that's at the level I'm going to cutting things down. I'm cutting things down because my expenses now versus the income I bring in, the ratios have spread so big that I have a dynamic business model now that makes so much more sense than my old bigger business model that was just bleeding cash out every month. And it just took so much to sustain that. It was so much stress, and I worked 80 hours a week to try to keep it afloat. And we made very good income as a reward for that, but at the same time, we sacrificed quality of life, and that's a really big deal. So you want to make sure that when you're bringing them in, you know, you can use things like that, Google Voice, there's many options, right? Find the options that make the most sense. Stop flirting with me, I'm trying to talk. She's flirting with me, and that's not fair. She's trying to interrupt me. She gave me really good tea. Everyone's looking at you now.
Now you made me over it.
No, they're all looking at you. They're like, stop, girl. We want to hear what he has to say next. Okay, I'm done teasing her. I took some notes, so let me make sure I stay on track because I only have a half hour, and I want to make sure I deliver everything to you guys. So the first step, once the phone call comes in, you want to create like what I call a lead intake sheet. Lead intake sheet is generally going to be address, property, phone number, all the information you need about the person, right? So you know who you're dealing with, what you're doing. There's a handful of questions you want to ask, and you want to make sure you ask as a beginner, and even as some intermediate advanced people won't ask these questions because they feel like maybe they're being rude or they're being too intrusive. Just remember, if you don't have the right information, you will not be able to serve them in the best way. You will waste a lot of their time if you don't ask the right questions. So some of the questions feel a little bit, I say that, you know, social pressure, like you're like, I don't want to ask them how much they owe or own the property. I promise if you don't ask them how much they know and owe on the property and they don't tell you what it is, it's probably too much, would be my guess. Because generally when they owe nothing, they offer it up. They're like, we owe nothing. They're proud of it. When they owe too much, they're very secretive about it. So you'll hear things like, when I owe $300,000 on a $200,000 property, what do you think the response is? Why are you asking me that? Oh, I don't know if I want to tell you that. That's private information. So, okay, then when they say that, I'm like, okay, I understand it's private information. And generally, but in order to go forward with the way this works, I have to have that piece of information because in general, I can't help you. I don't even know where to start unless I know what you owe. Assuming you don't owe a lot though, right? How long have you owned the property? 10 years. How much did you pay for it 10 years ago? Have you taken any extra mortgages? I start weeding down and then eventually they just give in. They get like annoyed by me and they just give me the mortgage. But it's because I've lost that social pressure to be nice and to accommodate them, because often you got to make sure you have to save them from themselves, because they will not tell you and then you'll go see the house, you'll put it under, I've even had people put it under contract and then sell it to me and then they're like, hey, you owe way more than I can actually even buy it for, because they were just afraid to ask how much you owe. So how much you owe is really important. I usually start off like, tell me about why you decided to sell the house, because the motivation behind why they're selling is very important. And you want to really dig deep. So use techniques when you're asking these questions, you use techniques to dig deeper. So if I asked, hey, why are you selling the house? What made you? Well, we just want to sell. So that's not a really sufficient answer for the record, right? You need to say, oh, you just want to sell. What made you want to just sell? I mean, obviously, it sounds like you have a great house, and what made you decide to sell now? Well, we're going to do this. Tell me more about that. Okay, great. And what did that mean, and how did that happen? You see, you take the one question, you dig like multiple layers down, because they answer what I call, they answer with smokescreen answers, essentially. So they'll give you the answer that is, less private up here, but the more you dig, you start to get down to the true reasoning behind why they're selling and what motivated them to sell. If you don't get to that true reasoning, you will spend a lot of time and you will not service them correctly. And you always want to take it from the frame, the positive frame, that you're not being intrusive. You're doing this so you can give them the best service and you can give them the most money. You can make sure you're a good fit for them and not waste their time, because their time is very valuable. And if they think they like you and you're going to work together and come to find out what you do doesn't make sense for what they're trying to accomplish, well, you've wasted a lot of their time and your time. So be respectful of them and ask them and help them do the right thing, because they often don't know what the right thing is. So it's your job to educate them and teach them this is the right thing. This is how we do business, and you just be assertive about it. Like, this is how I do business and this is what I need. It's not a big deal, right?
Right.
You don't owe too much money, is that correct? Or how long ago did you get it? Just start asking those questions. So the questions, and I'm gonna give you a couple more, and you can write them down. I also, at the end of this, by the way, I'm gonna share, anyone that wants to email me, I'll give you my email, and I'll share our intake sheet for anyone that wants it here completely for free. Just email me, I'll send it back to you. And it generally has every question we asked and the details of the things we wanna ask and know as Restore House. I mean, we flipped 450 houses. We've worked on this sheet at least 100 hours through a lot of data, a lot of feedback, a lot of just talking to people. So pretty awesome that way, because most of these things that are being sold from trainers are literally stuff that they've done 4 houses and they're like, oh, this is the best thing to use. We've refined this over like 10 years. So it's a pretty cool sheet. It'll give you everything you need to know as a beginner. The only thing I would tell you to do with the sheet is actually follow it, because it'll be hard, because some of the things you're gonna be like, I don't feel comfortable asking that. I don't wanna ask them that. And I promise you the thing you don't wanna ask them is the thing you should be asking, right? It's the thing, anything you don't feel comfortable asking is the question you should be focusing on and asking and digging deep with. So you just have to get past your fears. I could do it, you can do it. It happened. It only took me 2 months to make that happen. Had to talk to a therapist. It all worked out. I was like, I have these leads sitting on my desk and I won't call them back. Please help. I'm spending money. So I also asked them how much they owe, what is the timeline for selling, because I actually can figure out motivation based on when they want to sell the property. If they tell me, Mike, I need to sell that property like now, I need to sell it in the next month, that's motivation. Yesterday's amazing answer, can you come by it today? These are great answers, you don't get them that often. What you usually hear is, I'm no rush to sell. Can you be more clear, more specific? Because that's what they're going to want to tell you. They want to give you very unspecific answers. You need to make them clarify their answers. So if they say, whenever, well, when is whenever? I mean, so you're thinking like a year? Oh, not that long. Oh, maybe like 6 months. Start like funneling it down to an exact answer. Because you need to know, if it's 3 to 6 months, the motivation is lower. If it's 1 to 2 months, it's medium. And if it's like yesterday or under 30 days, it's usually high motivation. So even when people tell me that I want too much for the property, I owe nothing, but I need to sell it in 30 days, what do you think I do? How do you think I rate that lead? You got it, it's a hot lead. Even though they told me they want 250 and I know I can only pay 100, I know they have the motivation to listen to what I have to say and give me an opportunity to buy and maybe sell it to me. I consider that high motivation. If someone says I need 150 and I'll pay 100, but they are like, I don't need to sell it, only if I get my money, Well, that person usually won't even take 10 grand off their price most of the time. So like, if they don't, they're like, I can sell it in a year, or I can just sit on it, re-rent it. They're usually lower motivations. Now, I still work with those people, but I categorize them in a specific way, because if I have too much work today, well, guess who I'm going to first? Guess who I'm going to this afternoon to see? Oh, I happen to be in the neighborhood. Are you there? I just happen to be in Catonsville today. Oh, because you want to sell a house for cheap? I'm just like, and I'm getting in my car, I'm in Jarrettsville or something, and I'm racing there, because you don't get these phone calls that often, and when you do, you want to make sure you're very quick, because I promise you, I'll be there really quick. If you don't, or probably one of the other 10 guys in this room will be there very fast with a contract in hand. The good deals don't usually last over a few days. You know, they just don't. If someone's calling you and saying, I want a low number, you need to get out and try to sign it up at all costs, because that's a hot lead, and that's what we do at Hot Leads. So that's the next piece going into. Once we get the lead, then the next thing we start to figure out is what's the ARV on the property. I determine ARV based on, you know, square footage, size, all the little details, yard size of house, you know, the style of the house. I like to find at least 3 comps in similar part of the neighborhood. If I can't find 3 comps, then I usually will comp it lower, knowing that it is a lot of risk when you only have 1 comp. You know, that 1 comp could be an exact comp, but if it's only 1 comp, the problem is it disappears after 6 months. The next comp could be considerably lower or higher, so there's just too much fluctuation. I'd like to buy houses where I know that the numbers make sense and I have some solid proof that I'm going to be able to get this number. I'm at the point now where I can buy in a lot of obscure neighborhoods, and I know them so well that I've created a lot of the comps because I've done so many. But as a newbie, you definitely want to stick with stuff that it fits a mold, that it makes sense, so you can get clear data that tells you your investment's safe. Because for most of you guys, and this was true for me, I had almost all my money in my life into my first rehab. I'm sure this is going to be true for any of you guys in here who do your first rehab. You won't want to fail. I mean, obviously, if you fail, it could be very detrimental to your, you know, your retirement, anything, you know, just your life in general. So you want to be cautious. So you do it by making sure you have a house that, you know, if you're buying it from a wholesaler, well, don't listen to them, unfortunately. And I'm a wholesaler too, so I'm just telling you that. Find someone that either you should be comping yourself, or you should have a competent agent that actually understands comping. And I say competent because not every agent understands our numbers and how things work. They have to be someone that has sold some investment properties and are not just a retail agent, because retail agents won't generally have the same understanding as someone that sells a lot of flips. Someone that sells a lot of flips will have a little different understanding of what's going on, because it's a very different way to sell flips versus retail homes. Just different way of doing business. So make sure you can get the ARV, then you need to figure out the rehab, and you just need to be working with someone. If you don't know that yet, then what you need to do is partner up with someone. My first 10 deals I did, how I got over that is I partnered up with a guy I worked with. I did my first 10 deals with him. They were all wholesale deals that we ended up auctioning or wholesaling, and he helped me with a lot of stuff. He knew a lot of things I didn't know. And over 10 houses, I figured a lot of things out. So I partnered, and it was very helpful. You cannot partner, and if you have some of that experience, then fine. But you need to know 2 things in order to make a deal safe. You got to clearly know what it'll sell for, and you need to actually have a very specific, like, I know this, I could rehab this for 70 grand, up to the quality of every other rehab in the neighborhood. If you don't know that, and you're like, it's somewhere between 50 and 70, then I would say go get a partner, a friend, somebody that'll give you some advice, someone that knows something, because that's too big of a spread. There's 2 things that happen. The number one thing that you think would happen, and I would guess if I polled the audience, what do you think happens if you don't know your numbers? Give me a guess.
You don't make them, you pay too much.
Pay too much.
You pay too much, right?
Underestimate the
So then you lose money, you don't make money. You know what the biggest loss in real estate is that I've seen over a tremendous amount of data? It's people not paying enough for properties because they don't understand the market correctly, because they understand the market so poorly that they look at a deal and they're like, I don't know if that works, and then someone else sells it for more, knows the deal, makes it happen. So I'm not saying you need to pay more for every house, but you need to walk in and be super, super knowledgeable about exactly what this number is. Me and Carlos did a deal where I auctioned a deal off for him on our street in DC, and he was just telling me how we thought it was a 350 ARV. It didn't prove this, nothing else showed it would be more than 350. He's like, yeah, they got 450 for it. I'm like, oh shit. It's like, he made okay money, but he would have made better money if he sold it for 450. He wouldn't have decided to auction if he thought that was the case. We thought someone overpaid for it, right? We were discussing, like, how's he going to make money on this? It's a $100,000 rehab. He bought it for $2. 20 actually. So like how we make money. Well, how you make money is you sell it for $450. He knew something we didn't know, or he was lucky, one of the two. But I like to go the way where you actually know what's going on. And so that brings me back to like when you're new, try to find an area that you can really get to know. Farm an area that makes sense to you, that maybe you grew up in if it makes sense, or close to somewhere where you've spent a lot of time. For me, it was like Glen Burnie. I grew up in Brooklyn Park, so I do a lot of rehabs in Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie. But then I ventured out, I'm in Hamilton, and when I was doing 150 a year, I literally worked in every neighborhood. And where I had the least amount of success was when I went to neighborhoods I didn't truly understand. Because, you know, it's just one of those things. You can't figure out all the variables. If you're only going to do a couple houses a year, go to the area that gives you the best, safest return. And that's going to be an area you have some decent understanding of. If you tell me like Brooklyn Park, I can tell you like one side of the street sells for another more than another side. This block's more than that block. I mean, I can get down to that detail in Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie. So I've done, I mean, probably 150 rehabs in that area. My first 30 rehabs I did was in Brooklyn and Brooklyn Park. I didn't even go anywhere because I didn't have a reason to until I started wanting to do more. Then what I have to do? Oh, now I got to go to all these neighborhoods I don't understand. And I learned about those neighborhoods through the School of Hard Knocks. I have that information now, but it was a long road to figure things out. So I'm sure anyone who's growing and learning is going through that same thing. So once you actually can determine the ARV, you can determine exactly how much it's going to be to rehab it. Then you want to take the deal and run it through what's like a deal analyzer. The deal analyzer is really just going to be, you can find them almost anywhere on the internet. In general, you just want to be buying things somewhere between 65 to 75% of LTV, and that essentially means if the house is worth $100,000, your total investment would have to be $65,000 to $75,000 total investment for your purchase and your rehab. And if you do use that process, you will make money. The 75, I use it for areas where, let's say it's a $400,000 ARV, I'll go as high as 75 because I'm putting 30 grand into it, and you know I'll make 60 grand for doing a $30,000 rehab, even though it's 75% of LTV. When the deal's smaller, you're more around like 60% to 65, and that's going to be like $100,000 to $125,000 ARVs because that's what it takes to make any real money. You won't make money unless you have some of the numbers. So you have to find a way. I also, on my deal analyzers, I like to make 30 grand profit. That's kind of my minimum. I like to see a return of 15 to 20%, 15 minimum, 20 ideal, but I'll take 15 minimum. Every dollar I put into the renovation, I want to get a 50-cent return. So if it's a $100,000 renovation, I want to make $50,000 in profit. These are just like little things that I go with. And then I want to make sure that my MAO, which is maximum allowable offer, or ARV, is sitting around. I have such an underwriting criteria. It's so like intense. It tells me like for every price point in every county where what I should pay and what I should do. You don't have to be that specific, but just know there has to be some meat on the bones. Don't take $15,000 deals because $20,000 deals. Sounds like a lot of money, but the problem is if you knew for a fact you could make 15 or 20, I would do them all day long. But you don't know in this business, right? You have to have a little room for things to go wrong. Also, don't try to make $50,000 or $60,000 on $200,000 renovations. That's not very realistic. I mean, it happens. Like it's like baseball, right? You get up to bat, you're gonna strike out sometimes, you're gonna hit some singles. Every once in a while you'll hit a home run, and every once in a while, home run's like 50 grand. Every once in a while you hit a grand slam. That's making $100,000 on a renovation that's not $1 million renovation. So I've had a renovation I sold for $279, I made 100 grand on it. That's a grand slam. How many of them have I done? I've done 450 rehabs. I've done like 3 that I've made over 100 grand. And how I made it is I got the ARV so wrong on the low end, and it was a private deal, so no one was there to dispute me. So I literally just bought it for $50,000 less and then realized I just made tons of mistakes in a good way that I made a lot more money. So it was actually a really massive mistake that happened. You could do it every time. I mean, in theory, honestly, you just go in and like that could be your business model. It's like, I'm going to do 3 houses a year and I'm just going to make as much money as possible. But you would need to market more to do that. That's not a joke. You could really do that. You literally could do the marketing to find 15 deals a year, but only choose 3 of them. And that could be your business model. Maybe you wholesale off the rest. They make sense for me. Maybe I'll buy them because I'm only looking to make 25, 30. Yeah. Just get rich on all of them. But it really is about doing the minimum amount of work for the maximum amount of profit, right? So that's always what you're looking for, because if you're only going to do 1 or 2, but when you're new, I promise you, no one will be handing you a $50,000 deal because it just isn't that realistic. And in like a $200,000 to $300,000 ARV, that's a really good profit and return. I've done it on a few houses recently, and I'm proud of it and I'm happy about it, but I don't expect it. I know that it's something I can't duplicate over time. So super quick, and let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. I don't want you to go back and be like, you told me all these things, you left one thing out, and none of it's working. That could happen, by the way. So once you realize, and then once you get all this information like ARV, you get the price, you run it through the deal analyzer, it all starts to make sense. The last piece of it is obviously put it under contract for the number that you think makes some sense. If you don't know that, partner up. One of the things I've done with a lot of guys in the wholesale stuff, if they have deals, I'll work them completely for free with you. I ask one thing, if you close the deal, is give me an opportunity to buy it as a wholesale deal. So I've done some deals where I went out and closed the whole deal, ran the whole lead, literally put it under contract, and he's like, how much? I'll say, I'll pay 80, and the guy's like, I'm like, how much do you want to make? He's like, 20 grand. I go in and try and negotiate it for 60 grand. He's sitting there with me. If we can get it for 60, he makes 20. The lady says, I'll only take 71. I'll be like, do you want to take 9,000? They'll be like, yes or no. If he says no, then I'm like, no problem. This is what I do. I take that risk. Often they'll be like, 9 grand, fine. 2 grand, no. And then I go and work and try to negotiate and make it all happen. If I can bring it together, I get a rehab. If not, then I can help you in some other areas. And if none of that makes sense, then it's your deal. I'm not your partner, I'm not in, I'm just here to help. And I do that because I find that it's a good way for me to stay sharp, number one, but number two, generate some opportunities, give back and generate some opportunities, and you learn, and eventually you don't need me anymore. And I've done that with quite a few guys, and it's worked. I have a guy that I've been doing it for 6 years. So, and we've probably done 30, 40 deals together over the 6 years. Because he calls me whenever he has something he thinks is a fit. He's like, I don't want to go in there and mess with it and try to figure the number out. So if he's not wholesaling and he thinks that it's something that would be a good fit for me, he brings it to me. So once you do all the ARV, you run the numbers, you determine whether it's a hot deal, a warm deal, or a cold deal, then you want to put it under contract and you want to just figure out your exit strategy. Houses that are really, what I would say, not unique are usually generally good renovation opportunities if two things can happen. The house is, I would say, fits for the neighborhood, there's comps that support it, and the price point is somewhere between $150 to $350, maybe $400,000 on the high end. Anything above $400,000, you're gonna have more challenges, I promise you. I've done stuff as high as $1.5 million in Chevy Chase. I've done some really high-end stuff, and I have really sucky returns on everything above $400,000. The area where I've killed it is that price point of really right around like $250 to $260. That's my ideal price point, because it's just high enough to make enough money, but it's not high enough to where the market gets a little slower. Because what happens is, and now I'll explain to you quickly in theory, but what happens is once you take and get over like say $300,000 to $400,000, usually people are already living in a house, and if they decide to buy your house, it has to be so much nicer than the house they're currently living in, or they won't make the change. They're buying up, they're not buying new. Now people who are living in an apartment or living with their parents and want to buy their first house, that's a much better buyer. That's your first time home buyer, and that's what you want to shoot for. And in Maryland, that's usually about $150,000 to $300,000 as a first time home buyer. And that's really going to be your key kind of like just your cake area you want to be in. That's like where all the gravy is. It's the safest place to be, by the way, too. If you're living in an area that's like $900,000, then invest in an area that's not. Especially until you get better. Because the market is, you're competing with homeowners when you get into $900,000 neighborhoods. Really, that's your biggest competition as a homeowner who has so many resources, they'll just fix it.
Mike, also what we've seen is median housing price, obviously depending on what's in the market. Median housing price, another reason, and obviously you get conforming loan limits.
Say that last part, I couldn't hear you.
So
oh, cool.
So
absolutely, yep.
We do a lot of stuff in DC, and the stuff in DC, anything above 600,000 sits in the market a little bit longer even in DC.
It does.
Market.
Yep.
Because the home buyer is getting in there trying to get under that 417 loan limit. So whatever the zip code is, similar to what you just said, it's got to be median housing price.
Yeah, and that's something you probably really consider when making loans, right? You know certain areas, you're like, yeah, I'll make that loan, no problem. Sure. So you can find the money for it. You can find partners for stuff like that. I promise you, I found someone to do that Chevy Chase deal, but boy, was it hard. I mean, I just happened to find a guy that won $5 million playing poker and was like, I want to buy a really expensive house. And I was like, he bugged me for a year, and he's like, all right, I'll put all the cash up. And I was like, well, that's the only way it makes sense. We made like 150 grand. I gave him half. I made 75, but it was a nightmare. And for the money we had, and I'll tell you what happens, there's a psychological effect when you know you have so much money, your butthole gets tight. It's very scientific. It's called your butthole tightening up. And you don't sleep well when your butthole is tight, because so you want to really stay in your comfort zone. I mean, this is serious stuff. I'm giving you the deep secrets of like what happens to me at night, why I'm up all night long and I can't sleep. because I invested in $1.5 million house, and you know, it's set on the market for 45 days, and that isn't even that long, but it's really long when you got $1.5 million into something. We had about $1.2 million into it. I think we sold it for $1.5 million.
What was the return rate though on the $1,070,000?
It wasn't a great return, to be honest with you. Even 150 grand sounds like a lot of money, but the return was like 10%, 9%. It was very low. Yeah, we should have made 3, but again, this is the stuff you figure out. It turned into a little bit more than we thought, a little more rehab, then it sold for less, because apparently, you know, it's like all these little small dynamics that you just don't easily understand.
Was it sold at the auction or just a regular listing?
I just listed it with an agent, and we ended up rehabbing it because we rehabbed it super nice, and people in Chevy Chase don't like super nice. They don't like flashy. They actually like drive. They're all like rich, first of all, and they ride around like Priuses and stuff because they like like very understated homes, like very classy, like white. You know, where I don't usually do white. I'm doing a little more flashy because first time home buyer, it's like HD TV is what sells. You know, like granite countertops, flashier backsplashes. But when you get in Chevy Chase, there's a lot of stuff that looks like Ethan Allen. It's just very understated, very classy, but not flashy at all. So I actually had to tear out backsplash, tear out like some fancy stuff I did on the fireplace, put new fixtures in that looked boring to me. And I was like, and I spent $10,000 doing that, by the way, because it's out on the market, and everyone was like, it's not my taste. It isn't Chevy Chase taste. And meanwhile, I hired a designer and made all those choices, and I second guessed her because I was like, this is bullcrap. I thought I hired a bad designer. She actually was really good. I just didn't listen to her. And that's just what we do. Like that's why this stuff's so hard. I mean, I hired her and I knew she was amazing, but then I was like, oh, she messed up this time. She must be off her game. I wish she would have explained to me a little clearer that I didn't know what I was doing, and I try to over-design over her instead of like, you know, this stuff happens. This is all the mindset and the inner game of flipping houses is very deep subject, by the way.
Being democratic about it.
She understood. Yeah, she's very nice. She should have been a little more hard and kicked my butt, though. It would have saved me like 10 grand if I would have listened. But yeah, you learn these lessons. When you're doing like a $250,000 house, often there will be many comparable renovated homes that you can just literally pull up and just be like, this is what happens when you sell this house. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I want to answer it, but I want to say one thing before I start taking a couple questions. I gave you guys all note cards, and the purpose of the note cards is if you have a question, I have a Facebook page that I'm going to do a bunch of videos on, and what your questions are, I'm going to make all my videos answering your questions, essentially. So if you have a really good question, I'll give you like a 15 to 20 minute answer. Like literally a really in-depth answer that I could not do in this setting because you would be very bored. You know, well, many people would be bored, but one person would be like, wow, thank you for all that, and it really helped me a lot, but then everyone else would be bored. So I literally will answer that question in really big detail. Just put your name, your email, I'll send you an email, say, hey, I'm putting it up on the site today. All free, just stuff that helps me put some content for my Facebook page because I'm really bad about posting on it. And my social media manager said I need to stop being such a hermit and start posting and talking and sharing with people. So it's part of why I'm speaking tonight, to help you guys out and just give you any kind of feedback. So any questions, you know, I'll answer some quick questions now.
Your email.
Oh, sorry. So the place you want to send, so my email is mickygflipping@gmail.com.
Say it one more time.
Mickey G, like Mickey Mouse, G flipping @gmail.com. Email me and ask me for the intake sheet. I'll send that back to you. Put you on the buyer's list, whatever you want. You're looking for some deals.
What's your Facebook?
Facebook page is Mickey G Flips, @Mickey G Flips. And I'll be putting a lot of great videos on there, so some good content, good subjects, whatever you want. I'm literally doing it just so I can, it's my only way I feel comfortable communicating. I don't really want to be like, yeah guys, I'm taking a poop today. It feels amazing. I'm really against that. So I'm not gonna, like, I see people that talk about everything on Facebook. That's just not me. So I really want to talk about something that has some meaning. So there'll be some good stuff. If you're in the real estate flipping and you want to learn more about it, I'll have some cool stuff on there. Not selling anything. I don't have anything to sell. I make my money flipping houses, and I really just want to share, get feedback from the community that helps me make more money by flipping more houses, because we share together, you know.
I'll unfriend you if you put a food plate on their face.
Well, that would be amazing then. That's what I was looking for. Is that what it takes to get you off my Facebook? Just put poop on there? Consider that done, by the way.
I'll do that too.
Yeah, it's done. Exactly. No, I don't want to put that on there. I want content. So anybody have any questions they want to ask? Going once, going twice. No questions? Awesome. Oh, one question. There's only one. You can ask me, and everyone can do what you're doing.
Any particular time of the year we should start a rehab project so that we could sell it in a peak time?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. So 6 months of the year I buy like rampantly, and in 6 months of the year I rehab rampantly and try to sell. So things in early spring, February to say like June, July is going to be your absolute best season to sell. You'll get more money, you'll get more buyers, things won't sit as long. Once you get into the second half of the year, you absolutely can buy, but you have to take into consideration that they will sell for a little bit less than the comps. So if you're still putting a house on the market December 1st, it's going to go for a little bit more, less money. And if you try to get like an extra 10 grand or extra 5, you will just sit on the market till the spring, and then by then you'll be stigmatized for the fact that you've been out there 3-4 months. People will not even look at your house because they're just like, why isn't it sold? What's wrong with it? It's just psychological. There's a lot of psychology in selling homes. So the best time of the year is spring. If you had to do one a year, you would try to put it on April 1st. You know, February, March, April 1st would be a great time to put it on. So buy during Christmas, buy during the slow time, sell during the big time. It's like stock stuff.
Good question. Thanks a lot. Everyone, that's a wrap for tonight.